Welcome back to the York Boat Shop. This is episode 6 in building Elfyn. In this episode we're going to cover painting the exterior, rolling the boat over, and installing these frames. So let's get to it. While the hull is still upside down, I have filled all of the holes from screws and nails that were used to do the planking. The high build primers are thick paint, which can't fill any small indiscretions and voids in the hull itself, and just by sanding between coats you can get a pretty smooth surface. Following the high build primer, I painted the hull with 3 coats of Interlux Bright Sides, and prior to the final coat I did take my orbital sander with a 220 grit on there and sanded the whole hull. Now that doesn't mean there probably won't be some touch-up paints later, but it's going to be a lot easier to paint the hull upside down for the most part and not having to roll it over many times. So then it was time to remove all of the forms inside. Basically what I did was I lifted the boat off the forms, got the bow and stern onto some sawhorses so that the whole frame and structure was sitting freely underneath the boat. Remove the frames, remove all the structure, and then I was able to start taking apart the massive Strongback that I built. Following a bit of a sanding on the inside and filling any more little gaps and holes, I then took to filleting in the keelson and all of the overlaps between the frames, using a little bit of a fillet stick to make a nice smooth finished surface, and then it's time to install the frames themselves. I did have to shape some of the frames a little bit by creating some flat spots. I wanted as much sort of surface of the frames to be touching the surface of the inside of the boat so that we get a good bond. Otherwise, with the round frame against the hard chines, you're really only going to get a small area touching the boat. I also needed to bevel some of the edges so that we get a nice flat connection between the frame and the hull. Everything dry fitted. I set a screw in through to the keelson. That's going to be my reference point to making sure that when I glue this in, it goes back in the same location. I will leave the screw in and add a small wood plug later. Here I am just cutting off the frame heads. I have calculated the distance down based on the size of the gunnels that are going to go in, and then I just sanded the whole frame with my belt sander and orbital sander and cut the little sort of accent notch up near the top. I have fit, sanded, shaped the 2 frames as best I can. I am ready to install them. I dry fit them in there, clamped them in place, and then I masked off the areas in which we're going to put some thickened epoxy to glue them down. Way I don't have glue everywhere, and it'll be a lot easier to clean up. So we're going to thicken up some epoxy and just put it onto there, and then clean up the squeeze out. Temperatures locally here are about 30 degrees. It's sort of the hottest day of the year so far, and I've mixed up 2 pumps of West resin with the 205 fast hardener, and in a few minutes that cup is already getting hot, or warm anyway. It's not hot, I can still use it, but we got to get this stuff on there quick. I made sure I added a good deal amount of thickened epoxy. I want to make sure there's a bit of squeeze out onto my masking tape. So then I just set it in place, lined everything up to where my marks were. Set the screw in place, added my clamps. I used these long vice grip clamps. They're really good for reaching down and making sure that the frame was pulled nicely against the shear strake against the top of the hull. So with everything in place, I just used my putty knife to clean up all the squeeze out. I will be adding some fillets, small in that area, but I'll be doing that a bit later. So right now, the idea is just to get all of the excess off, clean up, pull off all the tape, and then I did use a bit of acetone to wipe off any epoxy that's on the frames themselves, because these will be bright work, whereas the bottom and the inside of the hull will all be painted. And with that, glued, set up overnight, frames are in place. And now that the frames are in place, I can move on to installing the rails. There's going to be some block spacers, the in whale and the out whale. We'll get to that in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. Hey, do give me a thumbs up and a like, and maybe become a subscriber, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.